We Saw a Thing is a movie podcast about remakes and sequels.
We saw a thing and talked about it.
This week, the guys watch The Witches. The following conversation has been edited for brevity.
We watched The Witches.
Yeah. Thoughts?
First of all, I've seen the 1990s Witches a lot. It's a hard one for me to unpack because there's a lot of nostalgia and history recorded, and obviously I knew what was going into it, what would happen when I went into it. I'm assuming you have not seen either.
No, this was my first pass through both, yeah.
I'm going to just say the 2020 version is how not to do CGI.
Yeah, it looked terrible.
This is the director of Forrest Gump and Back to the Future. He should know better than to put a product out with this level of CGI.
Well, especially when the original has Jim Henson creatures in it, and those practical effects hold up. Like, it was adorable watching the original because of the puppetry, and it was awesome. Like, I was getting super jazzed for the mice running around and the witches, like, costumes and, like, their facial features and stuff. Like, I thought it was awesome, and I was so disappointed by the CGI because it was such a stark difference.
In the 1990 version, the combination of practical and real-life animals really, really worked. I was like, okay, wow, look, that's a real mouse. That is a real snake. It added an element of spooky. Like, I feel like the 1990 version is way darker because of those original initial interactions with witches. The story of the painting to me is haunting.
It was such a great way to get into it because when you actually get into that like boardroom where all of the witches are, it gets so campy.
Yes.
So to have a bit of a lead up of exactly what you're saying with the painting, which was so eerie and creepy and like odd, it was such a great way to just like put you on edge as a viewer about what these witches were going to be and how like heinous and awful and what like a formidable foe they were going to be later in the film, which I never thought that they set up properly in the remake.
Well, in the remake, I didn't find them to be particularly upsetting at all, really. Like, here's the thing. When the Grand High Witch in the 90s version takes off her mask to reveal this incredible in-camera Jim Henson manic makeup with an enormous nose and just hideous everything.
Didn't it remind you of some of the creature design from the Dark Crystal?
It totally does. It absolutely does.
It is so great.
And you're watching Angelica Houston just play with this accent and her hatred for children. And she just gleefully is explaining, like, the child is no longer a child. The child is a mouse. Like, she is just having so much fun. And she's scary as hell. So when we get to the 2020 version and Anne Hathaway just has a really big, wide mouth, I was like, really?
I was so disappointed by the remake because Angelica Houston was so clearly having so much fun, as you just said. And as I was finishing it, I got really excited for Anne Hathaway's interpretation of that character because I'm like, man, she could just go like ultra bitch on this and just really revel in the silliness of that. And it could be amazing. Like, I really thought she was going to hammer a performance out of the park. And then it just wasn't really anything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to like fault Anne Hathaway for that. I find that the CGI in it was so distracting. Like, when you can't even shell out for a real chicken in replacement of the painting story, you get this little girl story who turns into a chicken. Octavia Spencer's friend growing up turned into a chicken. So that's fine. But when she turns into a chicken, it's creepy. And then she's just a chicken, but they're still using CGI to put a chicken in front of you. Like, PETA shouldn't have been on you. It was just a chicken. And then the cat, the same thing with the black cat.
I feel like some of those things would have been not only easier, but probably cheaper and faster to do just in camera with a real animal.
Absolutely. And I looked over, I was watching it with Becky, and I looked over and I'm like they couldn't afford a chicken? Just, is this what this is going to be? Like, they're just going to do CGI everything? And they really did. Like, it was CGI mice everywhere, even when the mice were moving around. And you had a cat that was all CGI, which means someone literally built that whole entire scene of, you know, the mouse coming down in the knitting and the cat. Like, how many months of animation was that where all you needed to do was just like drop the knitting and have a real cat bat some knitting?
For sure. I mean, the other side of the coin here is that, while it would have been great to have some of this stuff done in camera with actual animals, some of these animators were at home, quarantined, because, the world is still on fire with this COVID pandemic, and they just need something to do. So, like, God bless HBO Max for throwing them some cash and some work, I guess. But, like, maybe they should have thrown them more cash and a bit more time so that the CGI wasn't so distractingly bad.
Now, had you ever read the Roald Dahl book?
No, I hadn't read the book either, so I wasn't familiar with the story at all.
So the 2020 version is accurate to the book.
Okay.
The 1990 version has an ending that, when Roald Dahl saw it, he was really upset. Because to him, the point of the movie is, like, being a boy sucks, so you being a mouse is better. And that's what you should understand by the book, I guess. I've never read the book. But I gotta say, like, out of both films, I really appreciate the 1990s version more than this boy who stayed a mouse.
I agree. I had a theory as I finished watching the 90s version that maybe because of the way it ended, where he was turned back into a human and they had that like witch assistant who seemed to have like flip-flopped sides, perhaps, and was like very gleeful about that.
Yeah, now she was like a good witch?
Yeah, I guess. But they had this whole grand plan about going to America and fighting witches there. And so in my head, I wondered if maybe the remake, air quotes, was going to be more of a sequel so that maybe those characters did travel to the States and then we were going to get the continuation of that story.
Because one does take place in London and one does take place in America.
For sure. So I wondered if maybe there was going to be some sort of connection between the two stories. Like maybe they'd be similar stories and then our characters from the original would maybe meet at the end with our characters from the new one who've just gone through something similar with, witches in their community. Or if it was going to be the continuation of the story from the characters we've now grown to know in the 1990s version who now have traveled to America and are going to continue on their quest. And I was a little bit disappointed that they didn't do that because the first third of the movie is very different, and then certainly the ending is different. The middle to the end is almost beat for beat exactly the same. And boy, if this isn't just like an object lesson in maybe don't do that, or at least like try a little bit harder, because I mean, for so much of it to be so identical as far as the script and execution goes, and to have one where it works and one where it so aggressively doesn't, really just shows you that the moving pieces, it's not just the script, it's not just the director, it's not just the actors, it's not just the makeup or the special effects. Like, all of those pieces have to work together in order for the one same script to be successful versus not successful. And this is a great object lesson in that.
I agree with you. I think that I'd like to point out that I don't necessarily think that either one of these are like great movies. Like, I don't think the 1990s version is great. I think it's definitely...
But it's a lot of fun.
A lot better than the 2020 version. It is a lot of fun. Like, if I was giving it a rating, I'd probably give it like 3.5. It's very good. But it's very good because of its time, I think. I think because of what you're able to do with the story and the bookends of it, you get a very fun middle story, but you understand the little boy better in the 1990s version. You understand that he is training these mice. He loves these mice. You understand that he already is into like connects and constructs and all that. So that when the ending comes and he's like flying around and all that stuff, it makes sense. Like there's a considerable payoff to all of that stuff. Then you also throw in Rowan Atkinson, which I must say, like Stanley Tucci had his work cut out for him, but I also thought he was very good. But he's not going to be Rowan Atkinson good.
Rowan Atkinson was so much fun.
He's so much fun. He's having an affair. Like there is more depth to everybody in the 1990s version. And in the sequel, they really just wanted to get you in the room so that they could turn him into a mouse and then have the mouse adventure. It didn't feel like there was as much going on as the original version.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do enjoy that his pet mouse, was a child who'd been turned into a mouse years previous. I liked that. That was a nice difference.
And again, I don't know if that was a Roald Dahl like I said, the 2020 version sticks to Roald Dahl's version. So maybe that is a thing in the book. And maybe that's why they all stay together.
I did really like that change because in the original, the way they set up for him to have pet mice, my gut feeling was that his parents hadn't been killed, that they had been turned into mice who were now his pet mice. That was sort of the impression that I felt like the movie was giving me.
I see.
And I was disappointed that they weren't his parents, that they were just regular mice. And that was like kind of a disappointment that ran through the rest of the movie for me, where I was like, oh, okay, they're just mice. Well, that's like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I did appreciate that his, mouse companion had a bit of a part to play in the narrative of the newer version. I thought that was a really positive change. In a movie that, like, when it changed things, the things that it changed weren't really landing. And that did for me.
Okay, let's talk about another obvious change really quick. The 90s version is super white. Everybody in this film is white. Yeah, I mean, it's like Scandinavia. So, like, we get the 2020 version. We have Octavia Spencer and her grandson, who are black. I have to say, I really appreciated the way that Stanley Tucci could look down as if he was better, as if there was a class struggle there, or, I'm a better than you kind of person. And race did have kind of an important moment in the 2020 version, which added something different. And I think a lot of people could appreciate it. Not to mention there were witches of all kinds of races. I can look at the 2020 version and go like, I appreciate the diversity, and I appreciate that you tried to do something with the diversity or say something, even if it was small. If you had done an American version and everyone was white in America, that would be weird.
Yeah, especially small town America.
Absolutely.
The scene that stuck out to me as far as like race went in the movie was really when they pulled up to the hotel and they get out of their car.
Yes.
And, the butler or the, whatever it is, his role is with the hotel comes out and is just like really looking confused about why they're there.
Yes.
And they have an interaction that was really poignant to me. And then the way that Octavia Spencer was treating people who worked at the hotel was so different than the white people who were there as well. Like she was just a more human, caring character than a lot of the other people around her. And I appreciated that about the character.
And then at the end of the film, when she gets all that money, the first thing she does is go and give that money to the people in that place who need it.
Yeah, she was really just like giving it back, which I think that the consistency between Octavia Spencer's interpretation of that character and the 90s version of that character, she's like a very caring person. Like very clearly, she's got a history with the witches. Very clearly, she cares about her grandson and is distraught about the loss of his parents and that's clearly affected her. And I don't know, I thought she was a great character.
Yeah, I did too. The other weird factor to me on the difference of the 90s version. So in the Witches 2020 version, pretty obvious to tell a witch. Like if they got some Heath Ledger Joker lines on their face,
Yeah.
that's a witch.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
90s version, it could be anyone.
I loved the purple eye thing. I thought that was really fun.
Oh, I did too. I forgot about the purple eye thing. Like how the only way you could tell is if they have the tinge of purple in their eyes. And that's why Luke wouldn't come out of the tree when the woman's like, oh, but I have a snake for you.
It was fantastic because you'd see somebody walking past and their eyes would shift and then you'd just get this glimmer. Oh, witch. Oh, okay. I don't know, man. There was something really fun about that movie. It reminded me a lot of like the first Harry Potter or Goonies. Like it sort of falls between those two movies for me, whereas Goonies was like way more fun and way campier and is a movie that I'm like going to go back to. I don't know that I'll go back to The Witches, but it had some elements from both of the, it had some of the fantastical stuff from Harry Potter and like, rooting for the kids in a similar way and some of the silliness with the magic. And then it also had, some of the humor of Goonies and the in-camera special effects and makeup and stuff that I really appreciated and enjoyed about Goonies. So to me, it kind of falls like in between those two movies where I think it's better than the original Harry Potter, but I don't think it's as good as Goonies, even though it's got a similar vibe to both of them in my head.
I'm sorry, you think The Witches from 1990 is better than The Philosopher's Stone?
Yeah, I didn't enjoy that movie.
What?
It was fine.
Oh my...
It was fine. I don't know. I don't tend to enjoy Christopher Columbus films. I think that he's like a competent workaday director. I don't know that he brings anything really to the table except like competence.
I saw the first Harry Potter. I hadn't read the book. I went and saw it in theaters. I saw it 4 times.
Did you really?
To me, the first Harry Potter is so magical and it sets up this world perfectly. It's probably top 3 for me in the whole franchise.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so interesting to me. Now, I'd read the books, all the books that were available anyway. I can't remember if all the books were available before they started making movies. I don't think they were.
No, not all of them. It was like probably the first 3 were available, I would say.
Were they? I can't remember now.
And then they started coming out with more.
Yeah, I definitely, whatever books were available, I'd read all of them. And I'd read all of them multiple times at that point before the first movie came out. And
Okay.
And I was a big fan. And I was excited for the movie. And I remember walking out of the theater and being like, yeah, that's fine. But to me, those movies didn't really kick off until Prisoner of Azkaban. That was the first movie that really like got the vibe of the books in my head.
See, and a lot of people feel the same way. Like Prisoners of Azkaban is on most people's like in the top 3 of the whole thing. For sure, if not number 1.
It's definitely one of, if not my most favorite movie in that series, is Prisoner of Azkaban. So, like, the first 2 movies in that series, like, if I'm going to do a rewatch, obviously I'll watch them and I'll enjoy them for what they are. But I think that, the things that those movies set up really well is sort of the magic of the environment of being at Hogwarts and the music. And, the actors, like we just got introduced to this universe. But it's a thing that the books did really well, too. Now we're just talking about Harry Potter. The thing that the books did really well and that the movies also captured in a sense is that each of the books is written for the age group that the characters are in that year.
That's right.
So
yeah.
The world expands around them as they become older and more aware that the world is bigger than just Hogwarts. The text gets richer and the vocabulary gets more advanced and the books get longer and the story's more complex as the children age. And the movies did a pretty good job of that too. Not as great as the books did. I don't think the movies were as targeted. And I don't blame them for that, really.
Yeah, the films had to be pretty mainstream, especially when they realized what they had on their hands.
Oh, yeah. When you've got $1 billion franchise, you got to appeal to everyone.
Now, here's the thing, okay? I don't know if I can accurately say that I like Robert Zemeckis anymore. I love the Back to the Future trilogy. I love Forrest Gump. And I love Who Framed Roger Rabbit. But going back through all of his works, I think he is like sincerely lost something from those early 80s, 90s movies.
Well, yeah, okay. So the movie he did before The Witches was Welcome to Marwan. Have you seen that?
No, it didn't get great reviews.
No, it really didn't. He did The Walk in 2015, which I haven't seen.
See, I didn't mind The Walk. I thought it was pretty good. But there's a documentary about that walk that I had watched beforehand, so I like kind of knew all about the story, so maybe I didn't take it in as much, but I did enjoy it. And What Lies Beneath, I really do like. When I think about Flight, I don't think about Flight. I don't think about Death Becomes Her. I don't really think about Castaway at all. Romancing the Stone was great, but that's among those like Back to the Future timeline. You know what I mean? Like,
he was so into motion capture with the Polar Express and Beowulf and Christmas Carol, and then The Walk had some of that as well. And so like, and that, I don't know, he seemed very enamored with the technology and less with the storytelling, which was disappointing.
So I definitely think that like, if you're going to go back and watch some of these movies, I think that like, I just don't think he has the acclaim that he used to. Like, you can't say The Witches by, oh, it's a new Robert Zemeckis film. Whereas Spielberg, you might still run out and be like, I'm going to still go check out a Spielberg film. Or I'm going to go check out Denis Villeneuve because I like the director. I think Robert Zemeckis is at a point in his career where that doesn't mean anything.
No, I agree with you. I'm going through his directorial filmography right now, and like, I did really enjoy Castaway, but it's not a movie I ever go back to or think about. The last movie that I just happened to see Contact a few months ago. It's not a great movie, but it is a great story.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I like that movie.
Yeah, that story is pretty good.
Yeah, other than Castaway, that's probably the last time that like anything on his filmography really stands out to me. And so that was like 1997.
That's a while ago. Like,
he's definitely lost something.
Whereas Jim Henson, Jim Henson put down some money to make The Witches in 1990, and like, he died in 1990. So this would have been one of the last things, not that his company worked on, but that he specifically worked on. And like, the puppetry of the mice are adorable. Crisscrossing that with actual mice running around and you're like, oh man, that's a real mess. And then like, when you get close up, you see the puppet. Like, it's really well done, has a charm to it and a magic. I don't know if that holds up for a kid today. Like, he might see that and go, this looks really, really bad.
Maybe, I don't know.
If you're looking at Anne Hathaway and you're looking at, Angelica Houston, and you're looking at them when they're in their most monstrous form, Angelica Houston wins every time for that creature design.
Yeah, as she was pulling her face off, I was just like getting happy sitting there watching it. Like, oh my God, this is great. What is happening right now? Oh, she's so monstrous. This is wonderful. I was so happy in that moment. That was such a great scene, and she killed that performance. It was so much fun watching her.
It is. It really, really is. And I wish that more studios, I guess, would take a chance. I feel like, why wouldn't you want to take a chance? Why wouldn't you want to risk this? This is why, like, The Mandalorian is so popular. Like, if you gave me a CGI Baby Yoda, it may not work the same way it does with these little puppetry animatronics.
I mean, we talk about this on this podcast all the time, is that the in-camera special effects hold up in a very different way than CGI. CGI from the early days of CGI just looks shitty now. And I remember, Jurassic Park hitting theaters and everyone losing their minds about how photorealistic all of it was. And you go back to that now and it isn't photorealistic and it looks really crappy. But then you go back to these movies that relied on practical in-camera special effects or, matte painting or puppetry or miniatures or whatever it was, and there's a charm to it now. You can definitely tell it's not real, but it's charming, and that provides a level of suspension of disbelief where I'm not necessarily taken out of the moment because of crappy CGI or something that's happening where the physics are unbelievable or something. Whereas, like, if it's a puppet, I'm more likely to give it a little bit of forgiveness.
There's a little more personality there.
100%. That's why when you look at things like The Force Awakens and J.J. Abrams talking about it being very important that some of these creatures were practical and done in camera with makeup or miniatures or whatever. And there's a charm to that I think moviegoers appreciate. And it means that when you're going back to some of these older movies, they get to be campy, and you get to just enjoy them for what they are.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I definitely am a big fan.
Did you notice in the 90s version, when Angelica Houston is like ripping her face off and they're doing cutaway shots to the crowd of all the witches standing there or sitting there, and like every time they did a cutaway, I would notice that some of the witches in the audience
were men.
Yeah. It was so funny because they were clearly just like low on extras.
What about the look of glee on that one witch's face when the Grand High Wizard like zapped that other one, and then like the look of panic when she was called upon?
Oh, yeah.
But then like she gets so excited when they're about to turn him. Like everybody looks like they are horrible people, and you cannot wait for disgusting green gases to come out of their face. And they turn. And to be honest, the transformation from witch into mouse and child into mouse is equally terrifying in the 1990 version.
That special effect was particularly well done. It was very clear what was happening. It was terrifying. It was shocking. It was so funny when, you know, the mice are getting stomped on at the end and they're just exploding into green goo. I loved that.
Which to me also, I was like, did they really kill a mouse? A couple moments I thought, are they killing real mice?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's true. Maybe they were coming down and like they grabbed the mouse and then they put the green goo down and he squishes a pack. At some points, I was like, did they just crush a mouse? The other great thing was how the Grand High Witch turned into this hideous mouse, and Rowan Atkinson got to take care of her.
Yeah. That was great.
Instead of a cat.
Yes. That was just having more Rowan Atkinson in that movie was just always the right call. So that scene made me so happy. And just, he was weird and creepy and devious and mean and like awful. I loved his performance in that movie.
Okay. Well, would you recommend it to our viewers? Would you recommend both of them or just one of them, or what do you think?
Just the 90s version. If you're curious about the story at all, probably just read the book.
Actually, that's a good point. If you're curious about the story, read the book, because Roald Dahl, I don't think would like either one of these versions. I don't think either one of them really pushed the fact that he wanted you to believe that these kids liked being mice. And while they say that, there's nothing particularly bad about the way they were when they were children to make them like really want to be a mouse.
Yeah, agreed. I haven't read this particular Roald Dahl book, as we've discussed, and neither of you, but I've read other Roald Dahl books, as I'm sure you have. He's a great author. He writes some really fun stories. If I were you and this story sounds interesting, and definitely watch the 90s version. It's campy, it's weird, it's silly, it's goofy, it's a lot of fun. But if you just want to enjoy the story, definitely I think go for the book. I think I'm probably going to go and read the book at some point now.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, his stories are usually like way fuller and richer than what any adaptation can give it.
Yeah, which is usually the case when you're talking about like imaginative children's authors.
Oh, totally.
It's hard to capture that stuff on film.
And I will say, like, the 90s version is a little bit darker than the 2020 version, just in the fact that the creature design allows that to be, and the purple eyes, and the that cautionary tale of like, do not be alone in an alley where a witch might grab you. Because what the hell?
Yeah.
Terrifying.
Yeah. If the Dark Crystal and the Labyrinth appeals to you, then The Witches is like a way goofier version of that kind of storytelling.
Definitely. So do we know what we're watching next week?
Yes. I think we're watching 12 Monkeys.
Okay. 12 Monkeys, and it's got a short film that's on YouTube that it's based off of, right?
Yeah. Legeti, I think it's called. Yeah, it's a short film, and it sounds like a little bit experimental. I'm really curious to watch it. As is rare on this podcast, 12 Monkeys is a movie I have seen before, so that'll be fun.
Amazing. I've obviously seen it before. I can't remember a single thing about it, but I'm excited to give it a whirl with you, sir.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
And yes, so this concludes our like Halloween watching for at least a little while.
Yeah, well into November.
Next time on We Saw a Thing.
All right, in 2 weeks' time, we're diving into actually a movie that's one of my favorites. 12 Monkeys from Terry Gilliam is based on a French short film from the 60s. And it's an interesting one, so make sure you check it out. It's on YouTube, and it's only about a half an hour long. It's called Ligeti. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, so let me know.
We Saw a Thing is hosted by Jay Kennedy and Chris Shapcott. Produced by Shapcuts Media. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And check our show notes for links to our social media and credits. And leave a review on Apple Podcasts.